I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hello, Meyer Clinic's podcast listeners. We have Dr. Lisa Day. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Kristen.
And me, Kristen Walker. We're going to do a show called Embracing Powerlessness, the Foundation for Freedom. So, Dr. Lisa Day, take it away.
You betcha. And it's kind of ironic because when I was preparing for this podcast, we weren't in the throes of the corona fear, but it's quite, pertinent to what a lot of us are experiencing today. But, so when we think of powerlessness, when folks come in my office, I tell them that I believe that the greatest challenge to all humankind is truly and thoroughly embracing the concept of powerlessness. And I say that it's not something that we raise our hand and say, ooh, pick me. I'd like to learn this, right?
We say,
I
run.
Say I say it's something that is beaten out of us. And so, today when we talk, and many times when we think of powerlessness, lots of people are going to jump to the 12-step program, which we can talk about, here in a little bit. But really the powerlessness that I want to talk about, Kristen, is the powerlessness that we have in our day-to-day operating system. And it's something that we develop a skill of being able to differentiate where I have influence and where I'm absolutely powerless, so that we are not dumping our emotional resources into something that just exhausts us. And then looking at how that relates to freedom. And it's interesting because when I think of freedom, there's so many different things that come to mind. But really, at the end of the day, when I look at freedom and I teach it in my practice, it's that we come to a place that that external circumstances or force, if you will, light, dark, positive, negative, will not influence our state of stability. It won't get us off base. And I'll tell you, it's not, we can't prevent our exposure to dark and light influences, but I truly believe that with intent and mindfulness, with a rigorous practice, it is quite possible to come to a place where we can stay objective, or more objective, where we cannot get thrown off. And, the challenge in that, as I tell people, if you take your hands and you come to a Y in the road, we want to look at where do I have influence and where am I absolutely powerless? But the important thing is that in that space in between is a myriad of emotions. And one of the problems when we're trying to, embrace this powerlessness is that we don't know what to do with those emotions. We'll say, whatever, I don't care. And so what I want to look at today is how can we, as stewards of our vessel, truly come to a place where we can thoroughly embrace our powerlessness, so that we can put our emotional resources in a place where they'll be the most effective. And, when I think of that, you've heard me talk with you a lot about this, Kristen. I would literally cut off my right arm if I could free my daughter from her bipolar disorder. However, after years, of pain and trial and tribulations, it's only when I came to a place of truly getting it, truly it being beaten out of me, that I didn't create her bipolar disorder. I can't change her bipolar disorder.
Right.
And I can't take it away. And I'm not a bad mother.
It wasn't your fault. I mean, all those things.
Yeah. And it's only when we truly get that, that we can come to a place where I feel like I'm able to provide fierce strength or a foundation of holding space while she navigates this enormous challenge. So really wanting to differentiate the powerlessness that we experience in relationships and really to the world.
Absolutely. This made me think of something that happened this week. And, listeners, I'm so glad that I can share all of my foibles with you and that you lovingly accept them. But sometimes I think I'm too transparent, but you know what? It seems to help people. So I noticed that I was dealing with someone that lived by me, and all they do is complain, 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 complain. And that's very toxic to be around. And no matter how many times you tell someone, maybe you should stop complaining in nice ways or not nice ways, if they're stuck on their complaining, there's not anything that you can do. And you can actually make a situation more volatile for you by saying something, because then you become the target of their complaining. So
Well, and accepting that they enjoy being miserable is
Yes.
really a difficult thing to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that you are powerless to change. Because that, I think, when you're a highly empathic person, or if you're in the healing and the helping field, like being a counselor, you think in your younger days, well, I can help change people. They want to change. They want to not experience this. Well, that is not always true. And my goodness, what a great way to set yourself up to be a martyr.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I watched this trail of, okay, I'm complaining about this person to my son, and my son says to me, Mom, maybe, you should try, not complaining. And I laughed out loud and I said, thank you, Kellen, for putting up a boundary with me, because you're right. I don't like it that you're right, but you are right. He goes, don't you think you want to not have that take up so much rent in your head?
Well,
like,
well, bingo.
Yeah.
Much easier said than done, because the truth is that while we're powerful in many ways, there are far more areas where we are absolutely powerless. And,
Absolutely.
When we try to stay in control, or we try to help this person who's constantly complaining, what we're really holding on to is an illusion, right? We believe that this illusion of control, it makes us feel better. We're invested in making them feel better. But really, that's at the heart of our suffering. It's just cornerstone to it.
Yes. And it's a real good way to distract yourself from really dealing on yo stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and there's so many ways that, where we're powerless, and people don't necessarily look at these areas.
Yes.
Meaning, so when we think about our powerlessness, we're powerless over losing a family member to suicide or
Right.
disease. We're powerless over, this is a tough one, when we grow up with a dysfunctional or absent parent,
Yes.
whether they have mental illness, narcissism, if they're abusive or whatever, we're powerless over that. We're powerless if we've been exposed to sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. We're powerless over natural disasters or coronaviruses.
I was just going to say, we can be as fastidious as we want and keep things, hand sanitizer but you know what? We could still end up getting it. That's just, and we're powerless, we're powerless to that. So you're right.
We're
Being
powerless.
able to just
Yeah.
embrace those things and embrace you're tripping over yourself over what you think is your power. And having somebody lovingly say, hey, reboot. Let's take a look at where you think that you don't have any power, or maybe you don't have any power, but let's be okay with it. And not being defensive, or even if you are, going back to that person. I think there's so much grace in going back to the person that lovingly points something out to you, and you maybe don't like it right away, and then even later going back to them and saying, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
How brave of you.
Well, and another one that really gets us tripped up is if we have someone we love who develops a substance abuse problem. We really feel like, if I love you, I'm going to help you fix this.
Yeah.
And, when that person relapses, we feel like a failure. We feel that they don't love us. We take it personally. Yeah.
Yes.
We react pretty strongly. And the paradox in that, which I try to emphasize this so much to people, is that, in that situation where someone doesn't take our advice or our support or our direction, or we come to the reality that we cannot fix them, when we take it personally, it interferes with connection. And one thing I know is that cornerstone to all healing is connection. And so when we take it personal that a family member or loved one relapses and we think, screw you, I'm out of here. I am going to have nothing to do with you.
Right.
We cut off that connection. And that really is the lifeline. The connection is the lifeline for people to find that place to take responsibility for their healing, to find that place to reach out to God for love and support, to find that place to work a 12-step program. So it's not just about saying, yeah, I'm powerless over that, so I'm going to go to the beach. It's understanding that when we try to control something that we do not have control over, not only do we, as you said, suffer, we hurt, not only do we have the potential of making it worse for them, but I tell my clients, I said, you play God in people's lives.
Yes.
And so you interfere with two things, them taking responsibility and most importantly, them reaching out for the connection and support in their spiritual relationship that's necessary in so many struggles.
Absolutely.
So it's a challenging one. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to think about it. And I think that this is something that happens as you get older. We just did another show about this, where, you learn to sit with things. When I was younger, just snap decision. And I patted myself on the back for being so decisive and And in many ways, that was what made me a good entrepreneur, But now that I'm older, I go, I don't need to make a decision about that right away. I'm going to listen to how I'm feeling about something. I'm going to observe my behavior, and I'm going to sit with the total horrible discomfort of feeling like there's nothing I can do.
Uncertainty.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've learned, in this whole concept of powerlessness, as it's been beaten out of me many times, is, and I don't like to think about myself as a control freak, but we hate feeling out of control. We'll do pretty much anything to avoid that. And the reality is that almost everything, meaning all other people, places, and things, are completely out of our control. I tell people it's like swimming in the ocean. I grew up in South Florida and loved the ocean. And, coming to things that we're powerless over is like swimming in the ocean and getting caught in a riptide, right? The stronger you swim against it, it's pulling you out to sea. The only thing that happens is you exhaust yourself and you increase the likelihood that you will go down. And when we let go of that vortex or that pull, it will pull us out, but then it spits us back right up on shore.
Yes.
And powerless is like that. When we stop fighting that which we have no control over,
yes,
we're given the space in our heart, we're given the space in our mind to actually have an impact by focusing on self.
Absolutely. And when we talk about it, the foundation for freedom, I always think, okay, the ride, like you're talking about the ocean, it ripping you out and you're tumbling through it and so on, but you do end up back on the shore. It's the same thing with something going on in our lives. God has this amazing way of taking care of things. And then we think that we need to go in because we know better.
Well, absolutely. Well, I use this analogy, and I can't recall who shared this with me years ago, but it speaks to me. And it's like, you're walking down the street and you come along a man, and he's beating his head up, against a granite wall, and you say, hey, dude, why are you doing that? And he looks at you like, isn't this obvious, idiot? And, he says, this wall is causing me a lot of pain, so I'm trying to knock it down so it won't hurt me anymore. And, we often fail to realize that what's causing our pain is not other people, not that granite wall or the situation we're in, but it's the fact that we're trying to change them. And so, coming to the realization that we bang our heads against the wall because it's all we know what to do. And if we can stop doing that, we step back and look at, oh, it's a granite wall. It's my fight against it that's causing me my suffering. It's my fight against it that's causing me my pain.
Absolutely. It's and really that running away from the pain of things that we do too, because we don't want to ever feel pain. And I'm better, but I can't, this is a lifelong practice, but I can say, okay, you feel very uncomfortable right now. So just be uncomfortable. Like just go sit in
Embrace
a chair
it.
and
just embrace it.
Be completely uncomfortable. And things are powerless in certain ways right now, maybe because it hasn't worked out yet. We need a couple more days, or something else needs to happen that you don't need to stick your fingers into, or whatever it is. So just sit and be uncomfortable. or get up and move. I mean, this is an amazing thing, especially when you're someone who's depressed. You tend to, many depressed people I know will just sit in their anxiety, sit in their whatever's going on. And, we certainly anesthetize in the different ways that we do. And that's a way of avoiding that discomfort. But the act of getting up and physically moving your body, even to just sweep your floor,
Absolutely.
or rearrange a cupboard, not a whole kitchen, just go to one little cupboard or 3 drawers in your kitchen, that drunk drawer that has all this crap. Just sit down and acknowledge how uncomfortable you feel and organize a drawer. I swear to you, it'll make you feel better.
Well, it's small and accomplishable. It gives us a sense of value, because powerlessness is in no way saying that we should never take action, clean out that junk drawer. It's just saying that it's important that when we do take action, we're not beating our head up against that granite wall. That, we're having small and accomplishable tasks, whether they're, cleaning up the house or sweeping or what have you. One of the things that I often do, and I talk so much with my hands, so I'm here with my hands all over the place. But I say that, if we look at suffering, we look at human suffering, and that's at the top. What comes next under that is that we're struggling against some sort of reality. So we suffer because we're struggling against some sort of reality, and that reality may be simply our powerlessness. But the key in moving out of that, and this is a paradox for many people, is surrender. So, I call them the S's, that we suffer due to our struggling against reality. And the path out is a path, really of surrender. And embracing our powerlessness is not about not caring. It's about surrendering to the reality that we simply have no control or no influence over that which we're suffering about.
Right. Very true.
With that, and this is an ongoing, and I like how you say it's a lifelong challenge, because truly I say that we never arrive. We're practicing. And I think that one of the key components, excuse me, is really developing that keen skill of being able to differentiate where we do and we do not have control. And it becomes automatic. It becomes like blinking. Things come before us, and especially if they boom, hit us in our chest, then we've got a strong emotional reaction.
Right.
We like everybody left and right, travel's being canceled. You can't go to Rio de Janeiro, or you can't go to wherever you're going on your spring break. I see that a lot. And you are disappointed, and you're thrown off. But if we can surrender to the reality that there is no option there. And so, you're looking at everything that comes before you. Do I have influence? I have no influence. So I don't want to take my emotions and put them into the fight. I want to take my emotions and assess them and take them into relationship, meaning seek connection and comfort. That yes, it makes sense that you're disappointed. You were really looking forward to spending this time with your family. Right. And this is very disappointing, rather than, I can't believe it. Why can't I get to my vacation site? This is, people move into that fight, and that's what emotionally exhausts.
It exhausts them, and it exhausts anybody that, if they're not good at discharging their own emotional discomfort, then they go and they blast it. I call it emotional bullet sprays. They blast it on anyone within a 3-mile radius that'll listen, until people don't want to listen anymore. And it's kind of funny. I mean, it's not funny because it's very uncomfortable, but when you are around that constant complaining, and that person sitting in the middle of it is told in so many ways by people that they don't like being around them, but they don't hear it or see it because there's so much in the complaining.
They're just stuck in their misery.
Yep. You start to see a pattern. Oh, these people have unfriended you on Facebook, and they gave you some lame excuse as to why. Oh, this other person left and won't talk to you anymore. And they gave you some, people don't want to say the real reason why. And I used to be this, well, they should just say the truth and why it'll help that person. And now I realize, yes, sometimes that works. And sometimes that is the very wrong thing to do, because first of all, it's not your responsibility.
Well, it's not, but I think that's a beautiful example, Kristen, because I think that, if I have a friend, I think I've probably used this example before, and she's got lots and lots of wonderful qualities, but she's got one negative quality, or one of her negative qualities is that she talks poorly about other people. And you and
Mm.
I would call that gossip. She might call it prayer gossip. And so, I'm
It's less bad if there's prayer in front of it, I guess.
let's pray for her. She got a DUI. And so, I'm powerless over that character or that operating dynamic of this woman. But what I do have control over is mobilizing that truth and to say, my intention isn't to be unkind or to be disrespectful, but I don't do well with
Yeah.
talking about people unless they're present. And that's just mobilization of our truth.
Yes.
Now, if you reflect that back on boundaries, she might say, to heck with you, I don't want anything to do with you. We might
Right.
lose that relationship, but it also might be an opportunity, for her to grow. But at least we are not shoving our emotions down going, oh my gosh, if
Exactly.
she does this again, I'm going to, push her in the snow or something.
And you can, somewhat manage the behavior of someone else. I mean, I have noticed that people will rise up be on their best behavior with me in many, many ways. And then I find out later, maybe it's because I run this network, I don't know, whatever it is, but people will do that. And I find out later that they were deplorable with other people that work for me. And I don't tolerate that. I mean, I don't find out about, they don't want to complain to me. They're just like, whatever. But, later down the road, like someone quits or whatever. And then everyone comes to me and says, yeah, they were really awful for a year. And I'm like, you guys can always tell me these things.
Absolutely. So as a community, yeah, we can, just support that this is what we'll be a part of and this is what we won't be a part of.
Exactly. Yeah. I empower you to do that. But on the other hand, I don't feel bad if people feel called, because I don't make them do that, but if people feel called to behave better around me, I am not going to feel bad about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstresponder.mentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissistabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
And so oftentimes in my practice, we talk about the concept of powerlessness. And as I said, what I tell folks, it doesn't mean that we turn off our heart. I tell my clients, if I ever teach you not to feel, by all means, fire me. And so, when we look at what powerlessness looks like, there are several steps to it. And the first and foremost is we want to be able to acknowledge, what we're powerless over. And that's harder than it sounds, right? So
yes.
we bargain with that. And that's where I just love the serenity prayer, whether you're in a 12-step program or not. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. And here's the clincher, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Absolutely.
And developing that wisdom is absolutely a practice. And, at the end, it can take decades. And so when we do podcasts like this, it's not like you're going to accomplish this by the end of the weekend, right?
No, it's a lifelong thing.
Yeah, well, it's an invitation to a different path, and so I tell people,
you can forget, it's one of those things, like you can get a little squeaky, like a squeaky wheel, if you aren't tending to, WD-40 and polishing up that wheel and you can go back, and I will go, oh my gosh, I'm like going down in life, I'm going backwards. And then I have to tell myself, okay, stop with the negative talk. You just need to put some WD-40 on that squeak that you have always had, and you'll be fine again. And your friends, thank goodness, will tell you in loving ways if it gets too bad, because they know that I'm committed to figuring out this stuff. I mean, I walk around, I think it's obvious what's wrong with me. So.
Well, but I think you point to something, Kristen, though, that is so very important. It's that, when we come into therapy or when we're working on whatever our growth challenges are, there's a certain, it's our neighbor who's bothering us, right? Or it's our family member who's relapsed again, or is struggling with mental illness, or just got fired, or what have you. But the important thing that we have to remember is that, there are things that we can control, and those are our choices and actions. And there are things we can't control, which is essentially everything else. And so,
Yes.
coming to that clarity that, everybody, we have no control of other people's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, outcomes, exercise programs,
Yes.
job choices, that it's really freeing. And so, the first step really is to have, a thorough understanding of what you're powerless over. But it's a practice. We'll never, we'll never be done. We'll
Oh,
never be done. Yeah.
absolutely. We'll be carrying WD-40 around for a lifetime
Yeah.
supply in our back pocket.
Well, what I think that WD-40 alludes to, and this is again what I teach and practice all the time, is that self-awareness. In fact, I tell folks that when you come to a place in your operating system where you are aware of being aware, you're there. Meaning we are orchestrating our vessel. We're driving our vehicle. We're going, oh, pothole, or oh, enmeshment.
Right.
I'm trying to take responsibility for something I'm powerless over. And so unless we, so when I teach folks in therapy, I always say one of the most important components that we're going to talk about every single time we meet, and I want it to become a part of your operating system, is that self-awareness. Because untamed, if you will, we'll go back to our greatest dysfunctions. And so awareness leads to intention and mindfulness, and in developing this whole concept of powerlessness.
Absolutely.
And so once we figure out what we're powerless over, the other thing we want to realize is that we have to grieve, right? We have to let go.
Yes.
And that's hard. We get rigid, we get resistant.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that, when we are struggling with things that we're powerless over, unfortunately, one of the tragedies is it interferes with us being present in that moment. We get distracted by our agenda, what we think is a good outcome. But just as important as what we're powerless over, we really want to focus on what we can change, and that's our approach. While we're powerless over this coronavirus, we really can take responsibility for how we respond to it.
Right. And how we would respond to not just a family member becoming ill, respond to a friend, a neighbor, anyone in our area, how we will respond to them being ill, how kind and compassionate we are, understanding that there will be some stigma that they'll be getting from other people because of this, and how we will be treated if it happens to one of us is a real good measure against or with how kind and compassionate we are to others struggling with this.
Well, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for growth.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's kind of bizarre to watch, and not to belabor the coronavirus, but we talk about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, and you go to the grocery store and it's like Christmas at Costco. I mean, people are just bumping into each other and cutting you in line and grabbing the toilet paper and the Clorox, and it's become a dog eat dog world. And that's when we're operating out of that sympathetic fight or flight, self-preservation, self-protection. And I think that this is an opportunity, this is a bit of a bunny trail for us to consciously operate out of our parasympathetic system. That how do we as a collective whole provide support, acknowledging where we're powerless. So if our neighbor comes down with coronavirus, we're powerless over that.
Right.
But if we duck and run in the garage with our hazmat outfit on,
Right.
we have influence if we are able to say, I'm here, I'm compassionate, I'm empathic. How can I help? What can I do to support your journey or your challenge?
Can I go to the store and get food for you and leave it on your porch? Can I do things like that for you to make your isolation more palpable, or palatable? Palatable, yeah, that's the right word. But yeah, things like that, that again, it's an action. So even in your powerlessness, you can still take action that will make it more comfortable for you to feel like powerless.
Well, and I think what you're looking at, which is a huge part of it, is that you're taking responsibility, which means that you're not getting stuck on blaming them for having the coronavirus,
right,
or for being in that situation, but you're taking responsibility to focus on what you can do and how you can be kind, loving, and compassionate, for what they're experiencing. Oftentimes when people come across things that they're powerless over, we blame them. And I say to folks, I say, I don't know a single alcoholic or a single addict who said, I really want to play with these substances and come to a place where I'm absolutely out of control, have spent all of my money, and my family hates
Broken
me.
relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to blame them. Oh, they're a loser or they're no good.
Right.
Instead of acknowledging that this individual has a brain chemistry dynamic with which they are powerless over. They're
Yes.
powerless over their brain chemistry. Now, granted, they can make choices with their behaviors and their approach, and if they work a 12-step program, but the fact that they are an addict or an alcoholic, they're not bad people. They're wonderful,
Right.
loving people. They just have a brain chemistry that has left them susceptible to disease.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And, it's an interesting thing too, when you have something like this, or even depression, people can't help that either. But how many times are they told they're lazy, they're deficient in some way because they are depressed? And you being that person that struggles with it, you already are living in shame and all kinds of things because that's the depression talking. And you're
Mm-hmm.
already thinking that people are thinking those things of you. And I even know how I am. Like, I know come fall, like I'm shot out of a cannon in the spring and the summer. And then I start to go into what I call the cave come fall. And I do go through, at least at the shortest, a 6-week period of really feeling like the world is against me. Now, I know how to manage that because I've been doing it for 50 years.
Yeah. But when
I know that that's going to happen,
Well, and I think that, when your friends and family want to jump in and do the fix and repair,
Yeah.
From a place of love, I think inadvertently it only makes one feel worse, more shame, that I'm bad.
Yes.
I'm not,
Yes.
yeah, it interferes with you being able to embrace the challenge before you. And instead you judge the challenge, of you.
There are beautiful things to be learned from going into a depression. If you can't help it, if you're powerless against it because that's your brain chemistry, that's your body chemistry, then it's okay to this whole show is about. It's okay to embrace going into the cave. That's what I call it. Okay, it's time for me to go into the cave. And I look at it now like, what do I have to learn from this experience? What did I need to go so inward for? And now I come out with these amazing life transforming things. Very uncomfortable, to feel that, but I come out with these things that I don't know I would have gotten at the level that I did had I not been depressed.
Despair is the step before growth, right? It's the ultimate
Yes.
despair. And there's no magic bullet for acceptance. I mean,
Right.
It's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes it feels, absolutely unacceptable that we're struggling or we're depressed. But the best thing to do is to challenge ourselves, and it is definitely a process. Acceptance is something that we practice. And for some, as simple as prayer is a form of acceptance. Help me, thy will be done, is letting go of my agenda and
Yep.
allow it, not struggling to change either my situation or other people's situation, but also staying, connected to the issue at hand. And, I think that when we're able to identify where we're powerless, when we're able to identify where we do have influence, when we're able to let go, when we're able to really the practice, of that acceptance, then we're able to move into a place where we can have impact, and that's holding space. We
Right.
can meet that person right where they are on their journey that they're navigating with their own 2 feet, and we can love, which is something that we
Yes.
can always do. We can always love. But when we are too attached to the outcome of whatever that challenge is at hand, we take it personally when it doesn't go in the direction that we want. And all kinds of suffering, all kinds of chaos develops.
I know. I love sitting in a thing, having a conversation and saying, oh, this person is just so judgmental. And then having someone like my son who's doing it to be funny, but I hear what he's saying. Yeah, you're being awfully judgmental about their judgmentalness.
Oh, well, isn't that true? I tell
So
clients,
true.
I practice this myself, and I say that we want to challenge ourselves to abandon all judgment and criticism of self first,
Mhm.
and then others. But it's very, very, very difficult, because when people live a life or operate in a manner that's inconsistent with ours, we're judging them as being different. And that's why I use that phrase, it's not good or bad, it's just different. For me in my house, that wouldn't work well, because
Right.
when we judge, we stop getting to know, and we sever that opportunity for connection, right? And so, yeah, no, I think that judgment absolutely causes us to fall right on our face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's like those moments happen where somebody calls us out or we call ourselves out, whatever it is. And if I think for me, the goal is to like myself so much, to be so much a friend to myself and really like who I am, which I do finally. God, that's taken forever to go. Yeah, that kind of is not so hot, Kristen, but hey, you gave it your all. And I kind of laugh about it. Okay.
Well, you've integrated the strengths, the weaknesses, the good and the bad. And that's, when you're a kid and mom says, well, no one's going to love you if you don't love yourself. And you go in the mirror and you've got acne and a very large derriere, and you think,
Right.
no one's ever going to love me. But at that point, Kristen, is when we can give that unconditional love and acceptance
Yes.
to ourselves, then we are far better able to extend that compassion and that
To
empathy to
someone
others.
else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what's paramount in that journey is the powerlessness. And so, if you bring that back around, the true essence of freedom is living in a way that no external circumstances can get us off balance. And that is a direct result of looking at where we are putting our emotional resources. And I say that to the extent that we need something from somebody, they have power in our life. So if I need you to be sober, if I need you to be stable, if I need you to be happy, if I need you to be kind, loving, and respectful, if I need you to be available, all of those things tempt us or put us in a position of wanting to exert power in areas that potentially we don't have them. So, developing that discernment, in my opinion, is a lifelong challenge and importance, as we make our operating systems more and more healthy.
Right. So what would be something that we could say to ourselves, because we get caught up in stuff, especially when we're talking about something like powerlessness, we can get so caught up in the emotions of things or the hysteria going on and, in the media or whatever's going on in the world. What are things that you can do as we close this show to say, to sort of shock yourself into awareness, to have everything go,
yeah. So I'll tell you, and our listeners may not like this, but I have had this conversation at least out of 8 of my 10 clients yesterday. And that's that, when we are faced with something that is threatening, we as human beings, anything that threatens us, we're quick to jump to, this is threatening my survival. Well, this one is, right? This one is killing people all over the place.
right.
And so we are fighting, in our powerlessness, we're terrified, we're afraid. So that fear causes us to want to control. And I'll summarize this. So in the fear to control, we get swept away in the fear. And then it becomes this looping, and we're just terrified, and we move into this frenzy. And so literally what I encourage is that when we come to something that we are powerless over and we are afraid of, I say, okay, let's try it on and let's rest there. Coronavirus is in town. My family member has coronavirus. Now, what am I going to do? Because that will allow us to shift into, where do I have influence? But what causes the suffering is we get lost in the fear response, that cortisol, and we're resisting the reality. So really, when we come to a place, so we want to differentiate, where do I have influence and where I'm powerless? Fear is what pulls us back into the struggle, into the suffering. And so I say, I want you to try it on, rest in it. We have coronavirus in the family. Now what do we do? Follow me, because that's going to invite you to put your emotional resources in an area where you do have an impact.
And I will say this, and I'm not celebritizing here, just people that like Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson that have a big platform, whether it's because they're a movie star or they are a leader of a country, doesn't matter. They do have an enormous amount of power and influence. And for them to make the conscious choice to tell the world that they both have coronavirus was epic, because nobody doesn't like Tom Hanks.
I couldn't agree with you more.
So you don't think for a second that they did not purposefully, out of the graciousness of their souls, tell the world that they have this to allay fear and panic and all those things. Like that was a conscious choice on their part. It wasn't just some willy-nilly thing. And for that is the reason why everybody loves the man.
Well, and it's an invitation to compassion. We think back
Yes.
with leprosy, they were confined to the caves, exiled from town. And they just really planted the seed of compassion and empathy that, we're all in this together. We are all in this together. And how can we, keep that space, provide that grace so that we can find, the path out of it, the path of healing.
Absolutely. Well, our next show is going to be a tail end of this one. We had the coronavirus show with Dr. Paul Meyer. Then today was Embracing Powerlessness, the Foundation for Freedom. And next will be Love and Power, personal power versus ego power. So I'm excited to move into that one. Dr. Lisa Day, thank you again.
Kristen, thank you so much.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps. Or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all we promised.